I don't need to have much of an introduction after that.
I wore my glasses to prove I was from Hollywood. That's and well, it's nice to meet you guys. How many of you are filmmakers and actors? Which is filmmakers?
Yeah, 6 filmmakers.
6 filmmakers.
And the rest are actors?
Yes.
Yes.
Whew. Anyway, first of all, I told some of the people out this is the first time I still have a couple of young guys, and I don't have anybody your age that listens to me for more than 2 minutes, so this is really thrilling. You guys are stuck. So there's so much to talk about on these particular subjects, so I thought it'd just be best to start and let you guys ask the things that are important to you, and I'll tell you whether you're right or wrong. Well, anybody want to start, or should we just get a cup of coffee?
Here's somebody jumping in. Filmmaker.
Filmmaker.
Hi. I've worked in both television and film, and there's a really big gap for that as far as behind the scenes goes. You know, when you're producing for television, you have a whole different set of skills that you need from when you're directing.
Well, see, now it's a whole different set of skills, you say?
Yeah, I mean.
You have a whole different set of time too, obviously. Yeah.
And I was wondering, just as an actor, is it different? Because I know you've worked in both, television and film.
Oh yeah.
Extensively.
I mean,
what's it like for you?
Yeah, it's not really as a creative set, you don't have the time to, actors all like to talk a lot, and figure stuff out. That's a problem which we'll get into later, but yeah, I mean, the movies, it's a whole different business now. I mean, in the late 70s and 80s, I had the great privilege of working with the best directors and the best, actors and the best cinematographers, best writers, and they're not all there now. I mean, we're getting people from, they shoot 2 commercials, and all of a sudden they're shooting some big picture, hanging someone from a wire. I don't know what they're doing. But my son, Scott, is not, and kids your age, unless we start this revolution, we'll get pictures back. What they actually had, I had a brilliant idea. I remember 3 of the heads of the studio, and I said, listen, I have a really great idea for you. How about we make pictures that have a beginning, a middle, and an end? He said, well, that's pretty novel, we'll try that. So television is just quick, they got to roll it out, so there's not too much thought. They don't pick it apart, and you usually underrun. Now, the truth of the matter is, things like some of those cable ones, like HBO, they do some better stuff than they're doing in the movies. They do some pretty nice stuff. And that, what's the other newest Star? A couple of those cable stations, they do some really nice stuff. But the whole business has changed. You see, like, years ago, we had, Disney, Warner, Mayer, and they called them bastards. They were bad guys. They were this. They were creeps. But the point is, they made movies for a living. Today they make refrigerators and televisions and whatever. They don't make movies. They want to know how many butts they can put in the seat, and that's what they do. So they're business guys, not. Now, of course, the true young filmmakers, you have it tough. I know my son, he made 3 movies, won many awards with them, but nobody sees them. Nobody sees them. So that has to be dealt with, because there are people out there who are very capable and very good. And we got to push through it. You want to go to the bathroom, or is that?
Who's the most effective director you've ever worked with?
Well, I've had Francis when he was young. Coppola he was pretty unbelievable. He's changed. I think the wine got to him a little bit. But as a director, mean, I don't know, he was only like 33 or something when he did that. And he's completely responsible for that in his. Let me make a statement first, and I'll relate to Francis. I'd much rather work with a director that had an idea, whether I agreed or not, but he had one idea, and didn't like shoot 90 million feet of film and then had the editor, you know, put the film together. I'd rather work with a guy, even though I thought it was wrong, but he stuck to his idea. I have much more respect for that. So Francis is one of those guys who has it all down. Now, to make what he did to be, I think, great, was he went to acting school. You know, he was a decent cinematographer, a great writer. He had written Patton when he was 23. And so he was pretty well versed. And the other thing was that he, it wasn't black and white. In other words, he was a Mediterranean Italian. He wasn't a Brooklyn Italian. So everything, but that had a lot to do with that picture being successful, because everything was done for the sake of family, right? You know. So his kids, all they knew was music. They were in the cutting room when they were 3, 4. They didn't know anything about gang fights or anything. I mean, so they were with art and music and wine, and his father was a lead flautist for Toscanini. So I thought that you put that. The biggest question I got asked was that a real horse's head? 81 people died. Nobody asked the question. Was that a real horse's head? Yeah. But everything was condoned for the sake of family, you know. So that's what made Francis so good. And I think the best part of being a great director is assembling the right people, you know. And if you look back at what Francis assembled, he had a guy named Dean Cavaleros, who just started. He became like one of the top seven. Gordy Willis, nobody knows him. Walter Murch was the top sound guy. He put them all together, you know, the special effects guys. So that takes a lot of genius, you know. You can't, you know, you could be a good director. Same with the, you know, your musicians. You know, you can have a great sax section, but the violinists stink, so you all stink. You know, you can't be good in a bad film. You just can't, and you got to have the brains to put the right team together, and you have to listen, both as a director and as an actor, especially as an actor. Did I say enough? Francis. I worked with a lot of other great ones. Not a lot, let's say. Claude Lelouch, and I had some really good guys.
I have questions for you.
Excuse me, can you talk louder?
I have a question.
No, not lean in.
Yes.
No.
What do you think is the most important qualities which director need to have to work with actors?
Okay, that's good. It's you know, everybody always says this, and they blow over because it seems too simple, and I'll probably try to go into it. Said you have to listen and talk to someone, right? You can't study your lines in a mirror the night before, because you're never going to be available to what the guy's going to say to you. You know, so I've studied my thing, and so if I kiss him or slap him, he's going to give me the reaction he had in the mirror that night. So he's not available to me, right? So availability would probably be number one. Secondly, and most importantly, is instinct. You got to get to the point where you trust it. So, for example, most people, when you're young, you know, read the part of Frankie. He's the bad guy. He pushes his mother-in-law down, he pushes his mother down a flight. Well, right away you start talking like this. You know, right away you become this bad person, right? Words, and sorry if there are any writers in the room, I don't mean to insult them, but words are pretty much secondary in movies, especially, because it's a behavioral thing, you know. It's a behavioral thing. It's the actor make their choices. In other words, let's take this guy. Now, what I mean about choices, let's say it's what I'm saying basically is F you can't be said any other way. It's not nice. You can't say it nicely. those two curse words, right? You can't say them nicely, so it's written. It's written that I push her down the stairs. I can't do that nicely. So the choices that I make, but they have to be real. Let's just, for example, say she's an old woman, we're on top of the stairs, and she's in a wheelchair, and I make a decision, and this is all inner life, that's what keeps people watching. You know, it's not talking words, it's behavior. Everything is behavioral. And I say to myself, you know, I really love this old lady. She's been so great to me, she brought me up. She saved my life, she fed me, I just love her, but this doctor told me she's gonna be in so much pain that it's unbearable. It's the worst pain that any human could ever have. And I love her so much, and I can't stand to see her go through that. So my line is, you old bitch, and I push her down the stairs. Now, all of a sudden, people go, what the heck was that? But I do it with love, you know. You know, without saying I'm sorry, but that's what I got going on, you know. Lady, or whatever your name is, you're going down, or whatever. I don't care what the line is. People in the audience go, what the hell was that? That guy's spooky, right? Because it was an inner life, and it was a choice that I made, and the great actors, the ones that keep me in the seat, like Brando, I think it's called unpredictability, okay? Because, you know, all the stories have been told. Greeks told them, right? Shakespeare told them. The good guy wins, the bad guy loses, the good guy gets the girl, you know. But the journey is what now is important. We know where it's going. So the more unpredictable, and you can't play unpredictable, by the way. It's choices. You don't play unpredictable. But you do have to look for, in every scene, for every writer, and I don't care if it's a hello scene, the most important thing is to find a conflict in the scene. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean bad. You know, you're leaving, and I have a reason inside of me that I don't want you to leave. I mean, it's something as small as that, but I have a very important reason. The audience doesn't have to know what goes on, but it all of a sudden gives you life, and you're really doing something other than talking and saying the words the way you studied them at night. No, you know, can't you stay for a second, and you have your reason not to go. So I don't care what scene it is, you must find a conflict in it. Every movie needs the conflict. Is that, you know what I'm saying? And then the rest is up to choices. Now, as far as instinct, I would bet that, I'll just make up a number, but 90% of the actors will get a script the first time they say, hey, Jimmy, look at the part of John. Any one of you, they say, you know, you look at the part of Emily, okay? I promise you that the first time you read it is probably the best you're gonna be. It's gonna be you. So what makes you do different than her? Your instinct, who you are. Some people don't have it and they don't make it. You know, they don't. But that's what makes you different. So the best example, I remember when I was younger and I'd stand with 200 guys who were reading for a Broadway show, you know. They hand you a piece of paper, you stand there like an idiot, you know. Smoke 6 packs of cigarettes, get nervous, you know, whatever. And you go in there and you go into this dark, big theater, the Schubert Theater or one of those theaters, and you can't see there's a couple of creeps out there, I don't know, they're all creeps because it's dark, you know. So they're, you know, the producer or the director, whatever it is. And you have this sheet of paper which you've looked at for like 3 minutes, right? And you're reading it with somebody who luckily speaks English, okay? And you get a call the next day, said, you're it. You did it, you're great. Jesus, I just got this part over 200 guys. We start in 4 weeks, whatever. Now the actor goes home and he starts to work. Because that's what we do. Never thinking there was a reason that they picked me over those other 199 guys. What was that? By the time I get back, I'm so far removed from what they chose, makes no sense. They picked me for a reason, right? And that was my first reading, it was my first instinct. And that's what they liked. But then we go home and we work because that's what we do, you know? And you're no longer that person. Mechanics is horrible. I mean, I don't like mechanical anything. Okay, so if you really listen and you really happen, wonderful things happen, or can happen. I'll go on with that too. See, I got your attention. I love I can talk like this. Is right. Well, shut up. That's what I want to tell my kids, but they leave me. They get in their car and they leave. Yeah.
You've gotten to work with some like great actors, and you of course, I'm sure you know you're a great actor. I'm sure you already know you're a great
Well,
actor.
I wish you'd take out a poster or something.
Yeah, what's one actor that you were like, I really want to learn something from this one?
Well, there's one. The one actor, and there's always time to tell. I'm not friends with actors, not because they're actors. I mean, a lot of them are full of self-importance and this and that, and I will tell you this is the greatest tip of all. But I've been friends with Bobby Duvall, who's out of his mind, by the way, for like 30, 40 years. And he'll call me and tell me, well, he had the greatest steak he ever had in his life. I mean, I don't know what's the matter with him, but he's just hysterical. And he's almost 9 years older than me, and he still has the same enthusiasm he had when he was like, 35. Guy's amazing. So he just keeps writing and wanting to do these odd pictures. And so I would say him. And I've done 5 with him. And he has a habit that everybody should learn. I find myself, when I'm off camera and I do it, Jesus, why did that feel so good? Why did that feel so good? You know, because I'm not aware of anything till it's over. And that's the best feeling, by the way. If I'm not aware of what I did, I know I was okay. At least I know I was listening. But when you think about it, the movies have to be shot with mirrors, because the only time you're really looking at what you're supposed to look at is when you're off camera. The rest of the time you're looking at a crew of guys and everything, and you're talking to a guy with 18 cameras behind his head, right? So off camera, Bobby was great. I mean, I drop my pants. I do anything to get a laugh out of, or get some reaction out of the person on camera. Now, the reason behind that is not being unselfish, it's basically selfish. Because you cannot be good in a bad scene, right? There's very many actors think like, the less I give them, the worse you'll be. Well, then the scene stinks, and you stink, right? There's no such thing as being good in a bad scene. Either it's all good, okay, or not good. You know what I mean? So, giving and being available, like I said before, is very important. So I would pick Duvall, and Brando, of course, by the King. He was like, he just got into like anything I said, he started laughing. And I don't know why. Maybe I was that bad, but he started. I had him laughing and we do things, but here's a guy who we'd be doing the scene, and figuratively speaking, a train could come through the room. He would not lose anything, and he would stay in the scene. The train just came through the room. Most people would run, hide, and go, what the? And anyway, where were we? And like the cat, the scene with the cat?
Yeah.
Well, that cat was the last minute decision when they put him on his lap, in the beginning when he sits down. So Francis said, let's get a cat. So they shoot the cat out again. The cat's like a little bit. And he sat on Marlon's lap. Now, most actors, when they get a prop, oh, please don't give that one a prop. I mean, they're not talking to you anymore. They're playing with it, whatever they do. So he did that whole scene. No one was aware of the cat, least of all Brando. And every once in a while, he just go down and he's just rubbing that cat. And the only thing that was brilliant when he got up, I'm telling you, we didn't rehearse with the cat. Didn't know the cat was going to be. Francis decided to drug some cat and put him there. And when he got up and he just started almost got on board. That hurt. He got up and he just brushed himself off and walked out and got rid of the hairs. He just is really available, you know, really available to everything, and that's the key. And that's the key. And unfortunately, there's a lot of luck involved, you know, as actors especially. Because I know so many actors who are brilliant, who haven't had their shot yet, but I know it will come. So why I say that is the studying with the right people and all the work with the right people really, really pays off, because your time will come. So I was lucky that most of mine came early, okay? But I knew enough that I studied for 3-4 years before I even wanted to go out. Because even as a dumb football player, I knew that as big as it seems, the community seems, it's really a small-knit group. Because word gets out, yeah, oh, I saw Jimmy Caan yesterday, the guy was pretty good, or he stunk, or whatever. And that goes around. So the point is, when your opportunity does come, it pays to be ready, you know? And it pays to just have faith in yourself. And if you do nothing else, you listen to who you're talking to, right? And you find some behavior to make it real. For example, if I'm talking to you, right, and I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go real bad, but I can't get up and excuse myself in front of a class. When you watch what happens, my speech pattern will start to change. I'll want to finish this in a hurry because I gotta go to the bathroom. But you don't know what's going on, except you go, wow, that guy's kind of interesting, you know? And you're going, what, am I annoying? No, I didn't say that. You know, what do you got to, I gotta go to the bathroom. Do you know what I mean? So, behavior, right? And to make the right choices. Not big choices, not, you know, just what's there that'll give you inner life. That's a lot of actor talk, but it's really important. Especially in the movies, it's a whole different thing. It's a heightened reality, but it's not as heightened as it is on stage. We gotta talk to people, you know, cameraman. I don't care if they want me, my face, don't get it. It's not my job, you know? Okay, well, if you know, you explain it to me. Yeah. And I think the best piece of advice I can give all of you, I mean, this is a business of passion. I mean, obviously, you know, and there used to be a poem that said they all want to play Hamlet, you know, they've not seen him, you know, mother dying of a dust gagging the heart, whatever, but I forgot how it went. But the point is, it mustn't become your life. That doesn't mean you don't want to be the best. Because I used to get accused, I'd go, they interview me and I go, no, acting's not my life. Immediately they say, oh, he doesn't care. That's nonsense. I care more than you did. I care. But you can't live for it. You can't live for it. You have to, you know, all these corny things, friends and family, and they come before it, because I've seen in every case, I don't know of one actor, I don't care what heights you achieve. Listen, I was #1 box office once in '79, and then I quit for 6 years. I took care of that. See, I didn't like that. So I quit. I didn't do a picture. After Thief, I didn't do a picture for 5 years because I was intelligent. But the point is, what is the point? The point is, no matter what heights you achieve in this business, no matter what, there is a point which you slide back. You come down. The degree varies from person to person. Now, the people who have everything that they have, their hearts, their soul, in that thing, they're the ones that hurt themselves. You know? So you can't get buried in that crap. You can be as good as you want. I mean, the doctor here, if he had to operate all day long, he'd go nuts. Right? And if he couldn't operate, he'd live. You know, but you guys are doing something you love, which is probably the most important thing. And some of you are maybe, you know, not gonna be as lucky as others, but you know, if you love it enough, you'll be involved some way. And that's where it's at, you know, doing what you like. And then, you know, you get into situations where, well, I've learned lately that there's a huge difference between wanting to work and having to work, you know? It's a bummer. They asked me, what's that picture you just did? I said, The Rent. They said, no, what was the name of it? I said, The Rent. That was The Rent. The Rent. My wife, she doesn't stop shouting. And I got 4 and 5 kids. Anything else you like that? And since I only have 7 minutes, here's something that I've learned. And by the way, you never do stop learning, you know, if you care. I mean, Bobby's still coming up with stuff. He's 83 or whatever. I mean, he's insane. The best people I've worked with, the most talented people that I've worked with, are always the nicest. It's really strange, isn't it? Not really. I mean, if you know, it's like, you know your capabilities. And the ones who talk about, oh, my dressing room, my hair, and that's a diversionary tactic. They don't want anybody to know that they can't do anything, so they divert you into going, oh, this dress doesn't fit, or this, you know, pants, and I want a wig, and I want, okay? So, the nicest people you will find are the most talented, almost always. Okay. Yes?
You've made several remarks about...
Excuse me?
Sorry. You've made several remarks about our generation being different in that things are overly commercial or that we're going down in some way. What do you believe that we can
Well,
do?
no, I don't understand going, I didn't hear that. They're going down?
Sorry. You've made a couple different remarks.
I was in a
about-
couple explosions too, so.
Oh.
Seriously.
About our generation of actors.
Yeah.
Maybe not going in the direction that they should.
No, not having as many opportunities as I had when I was your age. That's what I meant, because the business has changed now. I mean, you know, somebody asked me, and I've done things I wouldn't do if they put a bullet to my head, but I had kids, and, you know, that's what I meant about having to work and wanting to work. But, you know, I would never, ever give up, you know, when Deb or a couple of those guys, they call me and ask me if I wouldn't trade that for the world. They all look up to me, and I wouldn't, but I feel sometimes I've done something that would disturb that or kill it, you know, and that means a lot to me. Doesn't mean a whole lot to my wife. My kids, she don't care, she wants to rent, you know, so I'm just saying that there should be more opportunities to be creative and do pictures that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when this last television show I was on, they said, Jimmy, you did this series, which, God almighty. Anyway, what's with the movies? I said, well, I got a problem. Look, I don't get the girl anymore. You know, I can't kill a prehistoric animal with a sword, a big one. I can't jump from building to building, and I get nauseous hanging from wires. Where am I going? What's there to do? You know, but there's always, you know, these little ones that come along, like Hurt Locker and things like that, you know, that come along, and you gotta just keep taking those shots. You guys, people are getting tired of it now. I think it's enough with the Batman and all of that stuff. They're horrible Transformers. Those people should be arrested. But everything's guided towards the 14-year-old. Listen, look, it's a business, right? So if I make a picture like for 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, I mean, by the way, I love the animated films, they're great, but they overdo it. Now what happens? The kid goes, I know, I've taken, you know, like mom takes him, dad takes him, then grandpa takes him, then his nieces take him. They get 5 tickets out of the one kid because he wants to see it again. I ain't seen it again, you know, you take him, you know, so big brother will take you. But I mean, there's a reason behind it, you know, put the butts in the seat, like I say, you know. Some are really good, but most of them are just god awful. and god-awful actors. And you gotta find ways to work with them too. See, I mean, everything you have to make real. I remember, I think, I can't say the name. Sure I can. I worked with Faith Dunn, whatever, pain in the ass, the biggest pain in the ass ever. She put on like, she had enough makeup by the end of her head weighed 8 pounds. In between takes, she put on makeup, right? And if you gave her a prop or something, she was horrible. So myself, I put myself first. See, that's what I mean about actors. But Joaquin Phoenix, Mark Wahlberg, myself, we were all behind the camera, and she's playing her first scene with her. So we're all squeezing in behind the Mac box, you know, for eyeline, right? And she's playing my wife that I married because it was for looks. I didn't really care. And Charlize Theron was my stepdaughter. So we're standing there, and I'm trying to get her some reaction. I'm calling her every name, you know, whatever it took at that time to get her to like bad names, whatever. And I think, well, I gotta go on, but she's not. And then finally she says, cut. Could you move the yellow dot over about 1/4 of an inch, and then the blue dot, move it down to the, she had dots on it, and we were standing behind the camera. She was talking to the dots for her eyeline. I want to hit you right now. I swear to God, move the blue dot. That's you, Mark, you're the blue dot. Get over there. And then so the only way I could deal with it, James Gray was directing, and he left it in there, he liked it, he's pretty good. I had the scene where she comes into this bedroom, and I'm playing, to deal with it, I played like, this family that I have, I use it as a uniform, because he thinks he's a king, he runs some subway thing, you know, and he deals with the mayor and the, you know, of Queens. You know, so it's this little kingdom, a king of a little kingdom, but he dresses perfectly, and you know, and a family, of course, you know, helps the image. And basically, that's it. In my mind, that's what they were, just a painting that I carried around, right? So she comes in having seen something horrible with my daughter and Mark, or I don't know how many did this. Is like one scene I had with her, like, you know, it was a little lengthier. The other ones were easy. I just looked out the window of the car while she talked. I don't know. She said, can I take a pill and then put on my glasses? You got 2 lines. She said, well, are you gonna have the time to take the pill and put on your glasses? How about just saying what the hell you gotta say? So anyway, she came in and she started with the jewelry, and she was disgusting. She'd go like this to her, the person that brought her the jewelry. She dismissed her in front of people. You don't find too many of those. I'm getting even with her now. Somebody tape this. Don't do it. I got in so much trouble. So I came in and I tried to figure out what the hell could I do here and be there, you know? So I said to James Gray, I'm in my silk pajamas, you know, and I have my shoes and I'm all set up for tomorrow. I said, hey, you got one of those, you know, those red and blue spinners, you know, that shine your shoes, you know, one side's red, right? Yeah. I said, look, the guy's going to the meeting with the mayor of Queens, you know, tomorrow, and would it be all right, like, you know, I mean, he's so involved in whatever bull crap I gave him, he went for it. And I got this machine, and while she was talking, I was like, yeah, honey, yeah. And it was, you know, it was perfect. He left it in there, he loved it, with his hum over everything, it was great. And then I felt okay, you know. I was really into my shoes. Now, another piece of advice for filmmakers. This is one of the best pieces I ever got. When I directed a picture, which got brilliant reviews, but wasn't seen by many people. because they got the reviews a week and a half after it came out. It was called Hide in Plain Sight. And it was sort of a semi-documentary about the first person to witness relocation program. And I had this vision. I didn't want to direct it, but I said, this needs, at the time, I said, this needs somebody who has a style. This is 149 cuts in it. So I asked for Hal Ashby, and he was busy. So they said, well, why don't you, when I gave him the idea, why don't you direct it? I don't know. You know, that's like time consuming. So the point is that, what was the point? When I did this, I tried to get actors who nobody saw before. So I went to New York and cast, because it was a semi-documentary. And, you know, if it's Jack Nicholson, it takes people half hour to figure out, I mean, to say, forget that it's Jack Nicholson. The only problem was I had to be in it. It was part of the deal. But I got these actors who, I mean, Jill Eikenberry, nobody had seen before. A kid named Bobby Harrow, just some really good acting. And a little mistake, but he didn't do that much. My Gift to America, the professional Italian, what can't I think of the name? Danny Aiello, yeah. But the point was that Jill Eikenberry played this woman that comes in from California, and we shot in Buffalo. I was the first and same person to shoot in Buffalo, you know, which was great because I was 3,000 some miles away from the studio. That was the best part, because every day they want to see a little performance, you know, it's the dailies. It's not the picture. It's just the dailies. So we went over there, and Jill Eikenberry played this teacher that comes over since '69. She had this beehive haircut, you know, and I'm a tire worker, and I'm not a great guy. I mean, I'm not a big hero, you know, I'm a dope and this and that, but what happened in reality was this guy had 2 children, he was married, and this was the textbook case of the witness relocation program under President Johnson. And the first one took place in Buffalo. They took this one punk, and he gave up 12 of the mob up there. So they changed his name, you know, the identity, and they moved them with the kids. Except they made a mistake, they weren't his kids. You know, they made a mistake. So this guy, the tire worker, comes to see his kids in the house is vacant. You know, basically that's the story. In real life, it took the guy 10 years to find his kid. But that's too long a movie. so we made it like a year. But just for example, to show you how, this is what I started to say, but I'm there now anyway. Jill, when she came, I had this, her first thing was, and she was supposed to be like, to me, like a palm tree in the middle of Buffalo. It just doesn't fit. You know, she's a teacher, and I asked her to go to the spring fling for the tire workers, so everybody drinks beer and fights, and you know, it's one of those. So sure enough, she's all coiffed and nice, and but you know, like these domes and those, this guy. Anyway, a fight breaks out, and I hustle out of the thing. I'm sure, you know, that doesn't happen all the time, you know, it's just a couple of guys, you know. Would you like to take a walk? She says, yeah. Now, we had a 6-page scene where we walked down the street, we just shot it in one shot, you know, over the bumpers. It was all dark. Once in a while there was a store like an aquarium, a little light. So she says to me, and I did this with every one of them, first time she's walking with me, she says, well, what do you want me to do? I said, what the hell are you asking me for? She went, what? I said, what, don't you understand? What are you asking me for? Just do it. I don't know. Well, her acting was over. She was perfect. She was so nervous and out of whack. I mean, she was perfect. It's a sneaky, rotten trick. You know, but it worked. I mean, she was literally this palm tree. She was so out of her element, right? Because I was saying stupid stuff, and she was trying to answer, you know. So, I mean, there's all kinds of ways. And this Joe Grafossi was a guy who looked up to me, so I never paid him. We'd go out at night, and he'd try to impress me by telling me jokes, and I wouldn't pay any attention to his jokes. And everybody laughed, and then he'd get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, well, he was perfect. That's all he did all day long, like, he looked for, you know, was I okay, you know? Anyway, I don't know why I came up with that story, I had a much better story about it. But, oh, no. Oh, well. It was not a story about me. Anyway, I can't remember. Yeah.
Well, I love what you said before about, you know, just like trusting your instincts and, you know, that little anecdote about, you know, the guy getting the job and then working, and then it's something so far removed. So I guess I would just love to hear about, like, you know, if you get a role and you have the script in front of you, but you know everything's going to change once you know, start you're acting with people. I would just love to hear more.
When you say everything's gonna change, you mean words and stuff?
Yeah, like,
But that's the point.
So like, what
It's
is
not
it?
about words.
Not about words.
No, look, the truth is, if I know what my relationship to him is, I know what my relationship to her is, I know that he wants this for me and she wants that for me, and I know what I think about her, and I put on the costume, they put the costume on me. I don't care what words they are, you know what I mean? I know the relationship, I know that's really all you need. I need this from him, I don't want that from her. Whatever that conflict may be, I'm in love with her, you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what happens when people study words. It's not words, they come out. Again, you can't say F you nicely, you cannot, it is written. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like when you get, like, as opposed to studying the words, just studying the relationship.
That's not to say you don't work. You work
Yes.
on the leaves of the tree, you know? Like, if I had an accent, obviously I'd have to work on the accent. If I had a limp, I don't fortunately have to work on it because of non-Jewish activities. I'm all busted up. So those are the things you work at. And if I know my relationship to every single person in there, they can do what they want. You know? Now, this is where I was coming from. See, now I remember, I said about filmmakers, the most important thing. Now see, it comes back to me. That guy over there in the corner gave me a little Alzheimer's. I visited him for like 2 days, I was gone. Anyway, Blackie Malkin, Barry Malkin, was Francis Coppola's editor for years and years and years, great editor. And Francis said to me when I left, I said, you know, what do you say, boss? I mean, he's Jimmy, always match up. I said, great. And one guy said, what the hell does that mean? What does it mean? Now I'll tell you what it means. And this is really important in your acting, I think, and especially as filmmakers. I bet you that any one of your favorite pictures, you know there's 2 great moments in it. That's what made the picture, 1 or 2 really great moments. Because if I mention a picture, so, oh, I love that part, and I love that was great. So what Francis meant, which Blackie kind of told me, and I was shooting everything pretty much in masters, because with too many cuts, and I didn't want to make it too choppy, you know, so I tried to shoot as much in masters. So Francis meant this. If 4 of us walked into a restaurant and I shot a master of the restaurant, you know, the maitre d' comes up, blah, 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 at the table, and walks the 4 of us to the table, right, that's a cut. We sit down, it's a cut. Push in, 4-shot, tighter 4-shot, whatever, 2-shot. And during the 2-shot, the girl, and this has happened, by accident spills this red wine, and nobody got out of it. Holy Jesus, and it was great. What happened was great. I mean, it was wonderful. You know, nobody said, oh, you know, you idiot. I mean, it's just, oh, don't worry about it, and everybody stayed in it, and we were cleaning up. So what he meant by matching up is go back and shoot the master again, go shoot the 4-shot again, and match to that moment. That's the important thing. Does that make sense to you? Match up. When you ever have a great moment, don't dismiss it. Dismiss the stuff you shot before it, because 2 of those make a great movie. Did that make sense? Good, somebody explain it to me. Yeah. Ma'am?
What have you found to be the most effective ways that direct?
Could you speak a little louder again?
Yeah,
Like,
sorry.
explode.
How have you found, like, in terms of directing actors, like we talked about, or you talked about, like, directors that you found to be the most effective, but in terms of directing actors, how have you found those directors to be, or like, to be effective?
How did I find the directors?
As an actor.
To aid me, you mean?
Yeah, what have been the most effective ways that directors?
Well,
have
first of all, I
to-
believe, like, up front, if I don't like the director, I mean, I fortunately was not in a position, I wouldn't do it. But once I feel it, and I don't like when the studio does that either, once they pick him, it's his job. Then he's my boss. If that's what he wants, I'll argue with him, I mean, but I'll eventually do what it is he wants, but I'll do it my way. You know, make it real for me. Do you understand? So, like, a great example is when Michael Mann's first movie was Thief. Have anybody seen Thief? You're a good man. It's like, it's my probably favorite picture as an actor, you know. When Michael Mann that was his very first picture, you know. And I was a big shot. He had this little thing, we got it made in like 11 minutes. But I played a guy from Chicago who I was a thief. And I was a thief and I lost like 11 years in jail for stealing $40. And I'm starting to talk like the guy again, you know, but, and he wasted all this time, right? But he knew he'd survive, right? Because he didn't give a F about himself or anybody else. That's when he knew he'd survive, right? Now he had this little collage that when he got out, he wanted that collage, have Willie Nelson was in it. He was his old mentor, and he wanted a baby and wife. It was all in this collage. It's really a wonderful movie. And the point is, when I got out, I spoke very clearly. If you listen to the picture, Michael wasn't aware of it until I was 3/4 of the way through. There's not one contraction. I chose not to make one contraction. There isn't, wasn't. There was no contraction in the picture. So I said, I am the last guy on earth that you want to have with, you know, and that's the way. You want to meet people, join a Lonely Hearts Club, okay? And it was very slow and distinct. So Mike says, if you're a guy in a hurry, that you lost 11 years, you know, and you're in a hurry to get that, why are you speaking so slowly and distinctly? Because I never have to repeat myself, okay? So, okay, you know, and that was, you know, that was it. So, you know, Michael was good enough to listen and like the idea. And then I would sneak in words that he didn't even know. You know, we used to call them like $4 words, you know, guys who were kind of like gangsterish, you know. And I have this one scene that he didn't hear it till he watched like the fourth take in the cutting room. The guy says, the guy Profsky, in the middle, he says, I said, the yield of my labor is in your pocket. I said, but that's okay because, that is okay because, and I said, that the word was, but I elected to do that. In the take, I said, the yield of my labor is in your pocket, but that is okay because I elected it to do that. I said, elected it. And it just went right over his head. But that's one of them $4 words, you know what I like. So he goes, you son of a bitch. I said it 5 times. But it stayed, you know, but it was, you know. So directors, you know, can be really good and you know, and when they have an idea and it stays on that idea, I pretty much go with them. But they also, if they listen and at least hear you out, that's great. Yeah, you should speak anyway, every time, because if that's maybe a better answer. But ultimately, it's his picture, so you have to find a way to do what you want to do under his rules. Like the Army.
I'm actually a filmmaker, so I'd be the.
Huh?
I would be the one who'd have to listen, but. So I'm actually a filmmaker, not an actor, so I'd be the one who'd have to listen.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, but you know what? The truth of the matter is, if you think about it, when I did my picture, I never stopped a living unit. And we moved, every day I moved locations because I did everything, like I said, masters. So And then sometimes I give the crew, we finished at 2 o'clock, and these producers say, what are you talking about? I said, what do you want to do, load the trucks up, go to the next location? I'm done. But then when I needed the guys, they stayed there, you know, and I had this fancy shot forever. But, holy Jesus, I'm going to see now. What was your question again?
So I was just asking how directors have been effective at directing you as an actor, but you answered it well.
No, but I was going to tell you about, you said something else. God,
Oh, and then you made a comment that made it sound like you thought I was an actor, not a.
No, I didn't think
Okay.
anything.
Sorry.
I didn't think you were one thing or the other. I think this is all applicable, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the point, you know, it's like, it's like, if you have a good director, he'll listen. This is what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, so I had a big crew, and guys would come up with ideas, right? The guy who made coffee, he'd say, hey, Jimmy, what if you, I listen. Because maybe one of them is good, and it becomes mine, doesn't it? Jimmy was a genius. The coffee guy gave me the idea. But you listen, you know? Sure, you mean 95% they're not, you know, where you are. But what about the one that the guy gave me, you know? I said, Jimmy, that was the best moment ever. Yeah, coffee guy did. But that's the truth. So you listen. And you try to have fun. It's like, you know, I work with guys, they go in a corner, they study the word yes 18 times. What are you doing? Yes. Right in the mouth. What are you, yes. Just stupid, you know. It's stupid. Sir, ma'am. Anyway.
I often,
My kids never raise their hand.
as an actor, I sometimes have a hard time separating bringing myself to the work, but also honoring the character and what the writer intends for the character. And I just wanted to know how you find a healthy balance.
Explain that to me.
For instance, I had a chance to play Eddie Carboni from The Bridge a couple months ago, and I'm very dissimilar from Eddie in a lot of ways.
What ways?
The fact that he lives in Red Hook, New York, which is in a time that was really, really dangerous when I live in a very suburban white area. And
But isn't that the fun part of being an actor?
Right, yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, like, how do you...
So you'll be a different Eddie. I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Streetcar with Brando every time. Well, actually, I do. But you know what I mean? Your own Kowalski, your own... Why would you suppose that it wouldn't work?
Right.
I mean, the rest is, like I said, those are the leads. So you can pick up the accent. You work on that. That's the kind of work you do, right?
Right.
You can pick up a walk, but you don't have to be what your impression. You're not. Listen, a man once called me up and he wanted me to play on Michael. Another one. He said, Jimmy, I got a picture starring Al Pacino and Russell Crowe. I go, what's your next sentence? I want to know what you want. What is the next sentence? So he wanted me to play Edward R. Murrow in that, what is it, The Informer or The Insider? I said, hire Rich Little. What are you talking about? Want me to imitate somebody? No. You know, so that's the point. You're not imitating anybody. You're you. You know? And you do you. And it might be better than anything that's ever been done. That's why some of these guys try Hamlet, which of course I would never do. I did at one time we had this thing called Circle in the Park in New York where we were young. And I had like Peter Falk and all these guys, the worst New York accents you ever heard in your life, right? And Circle in the Park was a big thing. They put on 2 shows in Central Park a year or something. And I had an idea and I went to the head of it and I said, I want to do like Caesar, but I want to do it with all of these actors with this New York accent. Not for joke, do it as serious as a heart attack. You know, friends know what's going to lend me your ears, you know. It's not to praise him. But to do the whole thing like that. They punked out. I wasn't making fun of anybody except us. Anyway, it can be fun.
Can you just talk to them, because we're direct soon, but I think it'd be interesting to hear, since there's a lot of young directors and a lot of young actors, I find that other actors that I know, that they're like, directors don't know how to speak to actors.
Say again?
That directors don't know how to speak to actors. A lot of
No,
young directors
that's right.
don't know how to speak to actors. And
That's
can
true.
you speak to them about?
Well, yeah, I can. I sure can. You say, the first thing you say is, you don't know how to talk to an actor. That's number one. My favorite is the Duval again. He never gets upset about stupid things like, you know, trailer, this and that. But if you say certain things like, pace, what are you making a commercial over here, you know? He's saying, so he has the greatest blow-ups of all time, and anybody says anything about acting. And he was doing, this is my favorite story, this is just for your enjoyment, you know, Tonight Show. Anyway, he was doing Ike in the south of France. He was playing Eisenhower. And they had this sort of a fey English guy, you know, this pompous kind of guy. And he had all these soldiers, and here he was on a beach. And right before, and there's certain things you just don't say to Bobby, you know. Talking about it, you know, not knowing how to talk to actors. And before this, he's had 5 blow-ups like you've never seen. And I've done so many, I go in the corner, I die laughing, but he thinks he's gonna take somebody's eye on him. But then 10 minutes later, it's over, you know, it's always that around. But, so, I'll paraphrase, the director came up to him and said, Bobby, when you say that line, he said, it's not of the beach, it's not on the beaches, it's of the beaches, and then pause, and then smile.
Oh.
Now that would normally be an eye, easy. Easy be an eye. He just stared at him, poor smile. And instead he just turned around and walked up the beach and walked to his trailer. And his director started to go after him, and the assistant director grabbed him and says, leave him alone for a minute, you know? Just leave him be for a second. Well, just give him 15 minutes. Well, Jim, don't worry about it, it'll be okay. So he waits 20 minutes, says, can I go get him now? He says, yeah, okay. He goes up there, the trailer's empty. Where'd he go? He got in the car and he left, went back to the hotel. But not only that, he got on a plane and went to New York. And he called me and said, he told me to pause and smile. They don't know how to talk to him. Then begged he came back. No more pausing, smiling. Yeah, so it is a difficult situation. You know, you gotta, you know, it's like, you can relate it to anything, you know, like when Henrik's played backwards, I go, well, how do you play like that? You know, guys will tell you, you can't play like that. A guy runs with a football a certain way, you can't, what are you talking about? Why can't he? He's doing it. Do you know what I mean? And that's the situation. In the movies, everybody has their own style, you know. I mean, I remember that I don't know, in the Mexican Olympics, you remember Tom Smith, the guy who raised the black fist with the glove? Well, he never got beaten at 200, ever. But he came out of the box, this is just an example. You know, when you learn to sprint, it's 1 foot, that's a straight line, shortest distance between points, blah, blah, blah. So your first step is right in line with the next one. But he came out like a halfback. He shuffled for the first 2 or 3 steps. And he said, you can't do that. No one's ever beat him. Why don't you shut up? He's never lost. I mean, you know, that's the point. So I say that because you've got to find your way, you know, and it happens, but you got to make it as honest as you can. I mean, you can try to be decent and talk to them, and if they're complete jerk-offs, you're stuck. But most of them, if you have a good explanation as to why, you know, it's not, I'm not changing the blocking, I'm not changing, I just feel uncomfortable here. If they're halfway decent and you have something to say, just not, I don't want to do it, they'll usually listen. And if not, then you gotta, you know, do your Houdini and and do it your way. The greatest, boy, oh boy, see? The greatest moment I saw that's like that was Brando. And Francis, being as great as he was, one of the first scenes we did was in the Genco olive oil company, where this Salazzo was going to come up, the drug dealer, and da-da-da-da-da. And it was my first scene. I didn't know who I was yet. I mean, I had no idea, really, that first day. And I'm supposed to be a little disruptive and whatnot. So they invite Salazzo up. And he had a line which did not make any sense. So he says, Francis, I don't get this, you know. And the line was, I've agreed to meet with you because they told me you were a man to respect, of respect or to respect. I've agreed to meet with you because they told you were a man of respect, okay? That makes no sense to me. It's a whole deal and da-da-da. And Francis already had shot a scene where Bobby makes reference to that particular line in the back of a cab or in the back of a car. So he had to get it. So he says, Jesus, Marlon, I understand. He says, but I gotta have it because it's repeated. So I swear to you, he didn't bury it like most actors automatically go, you know, just throw it away. He said it clearer than any other line he said. But he said, I've agreed to meet with you because they told me you were a man to respect. Anyway, he looked up like, what did I just say? I mean, he made it so it was just great, you know, he just went, respect. So, I mean, you know, he found his way, you know what I mean? It's great, and you can find your way.
All right, one more question?
Yeah, it's going right off.
I have a question. What's the capital of Nebraska? Quick. All right, go ahead. That's my question.
So you mentioned when Robert Duvall had that reaction and he flew back to New York, and then inversely when Marlon Brando had his reaction and he said the line as he was supposed to, he didn't freak out and run away. What happens if as a director you can't predict what your actor's going to do? How much should you ask of them before you feel like you're crossing lines?
Well, like anything, I think most of that stuff is worked out before the movie. Major things, But usually if the guy hires you, if he has the power, and of course he does, or sometimes it's the other way around, like, sometimes we get to, say who it is. Most of the time, those actors, those directors will, because he's hired you, it makes no sense, to listen to you. Unless he was shoved, you were shoved down his throat or something, which doesn't happen. Does that make any sense? You always can talk. Is that what your question was?
Yeah.
How do you handle it?
Yeah, like what if...
As a director?
Yeah. Like if Marlon Brando...
Well, a director's got to be a pretty good psychologist, I guess. Yeah. It's like at a construction crew, the guy who's running that construction crew, this guy doesn't like height, this guy, well, I got to figure this out, And that's what a good director does. Gather the right people, and you try to avoid that kind of stuff. Now, they know Bobby, but they also know Bobby like... People who know Bobby don't say stupid things. He doesn't get mad about dumb stuff. Anything about acting, though, he gets upset. But he blows up, and 5 minutes later it's gone, so they know that. But listen, I've had a couple, I've done hundreds of movies. I've had a couple. Just a couple. I never missed a day's work, but this one jerk I walked off on. Anyway. He told me, but by the way, this guy apologized in the papers later. I was there for one day, I did him a favor, come in, and I was supposed to choke on these cookies. It was a stupid picture, it was the dumbest thing ever. And my manager, I fired him because he made me do it. He says, you gotta do it. Anyway, I'm a senator who told, and I'm taking these photo op pictures of eating Girl Scout cookies. So we're taking pictures with the Girl Scouts. And I'm supposed to, like in the middle of my speech, start, coughing, and I die. I choked to death.
So this schmuck, he goes in there and he goes, no, can you, first he asked me, he says, can you say that line to me? The line I said to the girl? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I'll do it for you with the girl, but I don't know what you want to prove here. I mean, you want to know if I know the words? What is the problem? No. So already I knew right away we were going to have a problem. So now he goes, Jimmy, can you cough like this? And he started telling me how to cough. I go, what? I said, let me ask you a question. Is this picture, is this, beyond the law of physics, or is there a line that we don't cross? No, that's the line. It was like there's a line we go, well, let me explain something to you. You can't cough if you're choking to death. What? Well, if you're choking to death, you can't take air in and you can't let it out. So it's pretty quiet. So the answer is no, I cannot cough like that. And then he said something else, then he said something, then he locked himself in a room. And I said, come on, just shoot your stupid picture. And he was so bad, he had another actor, the Lily Tomlin, there was a tape that you saw, that was the guy. Did you ever see that tape?
Oh, yeah.
Where she cursed this schmuck?
Yep.
And by the way, he turned out to be a pretty good director. He apologized to everybody. And George Clooney, you know what it takes to get George Clooney to try to punch you in the mouth? It's impossible. He did that with him. But he came out in the paper with, I have a lot of respect, saying, I did this, I was just a total ass and jerk, pompous idiot, and da-da-da. And I even had Jimmy Wolf to sit on me. So that was pretty cool. And then he made The Fighter.
Oh.
Yeah, he's doing good now. So he realized that he was an idiot. Anyway, the picture never came out, the other one, the coughing with the cookie. But I was never in it either.